talk about the Kurdish question in Turkey. Of course, the Kurdish question has a broader relevance for the entire region, but I will focus on Turkey. So, first of all, I will start with the abstract introduction, because I heard very valuable references to social theory earlier today. So I will have this very brief introduction, and then I will talk about the empirical facts in Turkey with regard to the Kurdish question. So, in terms of social theory, there are two ways to look at the identity question. One of them is the primordialist understanding of identities. And with identities, I mean the descent-based ethnic identities, in other words. And based on this approach, ethnic identities are persistent in time and mutually exclusive. The second approach to identities, which is the dominant approach today, is the constructivist approach, which believes identities transform in time from a longitudinal perspective, and they are not mutually exclusive. In other words, we have multiple identities, even ethnic identities, and they are not mutually exclusive, but they are very fuzzy areas, there are overlaps, and they are embedded in a multiplicity of identities. That being said, so this tells us that ethnic identities are invented, constructed, or made up. But this doesn't tell us that they don't exist. The ethnic identity exists because we believe it does. Because our political institutions and social institutions are designed in a way that the ethnic identities will continue to exist. That being said, since they are real, sociologically, not biologically, not genetically, but sociologically, since those identities are real, we treat them as real identities because that's a matter of people's sense of belongingness, identification. And if they identify with a certain group, then that group exists. So this is that simple. That being said, this tells us that there is the Kurdish identity. There is a Turkish identity, the Jewish identity, the Arab identity. In the Middle East, we have a multitude of such identities. And we don't have pure nation states, same as we don't have pure blood for any certain race or nation or ethnic identity. But they are real because they are socially constructed and socially maintained with certain institutional enforcement mechanisms. That being said, as we said that the Kurdish identity is a real one sociologically, like the Turkish identity, like the Arab identity, and it's the most significant ethnic identity in Turkey because we have a greater number of people who identify with the Kurdish identity. More than Turkish Arabs. We have some local Arabs in Turkey. We have local Armenians. We have local different ethnic groups, like any other country. Since that's a real identity group, like all other identity groups, and it matters because there is a greater number of people who identify with the Kurdish ethnic group, so we should treat it with the respect that it deserves. After that brief introduction, I want to talk about the relevance of Kurdish identity in Turkey on three separate but interdependent domains: the cultural domain, the political domain, and the security domain. The Kurdish identity is particularly important in these three interrelated domains:
Which is the second?
Cultural, political, and security. So culturally, the Kurdish identity rests on the language. So it's not an ethno-religious identity, it's an ethno-linguist identity. It's based on the dialects such as Kurmanch, Zazaki, or Sorani, different dialects. So, based on the language, there is a political contestation in Turkey. There are certain demands and there are certain policies. Some demands are matched, some demands are contested. Just to take a picture of this domain in Turkey, let's see what's the debate. So Turkey's Kurds, they have certain language-based rights, such as learning Kurdish in the public and private schools as an elective course, such as broadcasting in Kurdish both in state and private media channels, such as the scientific study of Kurdish language in the universities under the Kurdish language institutes, such as the free use of Kurdish language, of course, in political campaigns, such as bilingual science in Kurdish populated cities. But there is one contested area in which there is no final resolution, which is education in mother tongue. That's a demand which is demanded by certain segments of the Kurdish society, but not granted. So the mother tongue of education is still in Turkish. So that's a debate still going on. Some countries in the world provide education in multiple languages. Some countries don't. So Canada does it in French, in English. United States does not. In the United States, the only language of instruction is English. But they provide elective courses in Spanish and other languages. So Turkey follows this civic model of the United States in terms of providing education in Turkish and Kurdish as elective courses. So that's the cultural domain where we see the situation and ongoing debate. The second domain is political, in terms of political participation and political representation. So Turkey's Kurds vote for and run for a number of parties. And mostly the two parties are more important in terms of representing Kurds. One is the mainstream, non-ethnic party, the ruling AK Party in Turkey. The party is not an ethnic party, but an ideological party. Socially conservative, economically liberal. So, around half of Turkey's Kurds vote for the ruling AK Party. Of course, the party gets votes from the Kurds. Of course, the party nominates Kurds, both as parliamentary members and as the top chief executives, top bureaucrats. Let's say the chief of Turkish intelligence service is an ethnic Kurd. So half of Turkish Kurds politically vote for mainstream, non-ethnic parties based on their ideology or based on the political demands, political promises. The rest of Turkish Kurds, the other half of Turkish Kurds, they mobilize for ethnic Kurdish political parties. We have multiple ethnic Kurdish parties in Turkey, which run for the elections and are represented in the parliament. The biggest ethnic Kurdish party, the People's Democratic Party, but there are other smaller ethnic Kurdish parties. And some of them demand independence. We have, let's say, the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Turkey, which wants to see it. It's written in their official documents, and it's legal actually. There are multiple political parties in Turkey with the Kurdistan title, which want the Turkish state to pull out of the region of Turkey, southeast. They are legal as long as there is no violent encounter. So, to sum up the political sphere, the Kurdish political mobilization in Turkey, half of it goes to the mainstream non-ethnic channels, mostly the ruling AK Party. The other half mobilizes through the ethnic Kurdish parties. Some of these ethnic Kurdish parties want independence, some of them want territorial autonomy. The third domain in terms of Turkey's Kurdish question is the security domain. And unfortunately that's the domain we talk most about. Because when there's blood spilling there all over the floor, it's not easy to avoid that debate. So, Turkey has being threatened by multiple terrorist organizations. Some of them you never hear because they are very marginal, very small organizations. Let's say some leftist revolutionary organizations. They are very minor and their sphere of influence is very narrow, so we don't hear much about them. There are, of course, some radical organizations like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Turkey also suffered from such attacks. In our metropoles, we had certain suicide bomb attacks carried out by Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And the third major terrorist organization in Turkey is not a communist revolutionary one, it's not a radical Islamist one, but an ethnic one, which is the PKK, Partiye Karkaren Kurdistan in Kurdish, or the Workers' Party of Kurdistan in English. This is the organization that carries out attacks in Turkey. The organization is based in Iraq, in Kandil Mountains. It's the place where the headquarters of the organization are located. The organization has offshoots in Iran under the name of PEJAK, in Syria under the name of PYD. The organization also attacks Turkey, but has no safe haven in Turkey. There is no organization's office or military camp or training camp, no nothing in Turkey. But the organization infiltrates into the Turkish territory over the borders of Syria and Iraq, and sometimes through Iran, but mostly over Iraq. So, the organization is an ethnic terrorist organization, but there is some misconception when we think about such ethnic conflict cases, whether in the case of terrorism or guerrilla warfare or any kind of insurgency-related event. One particular misunderstanding about the PKK is, it is told that there is a Turkish-Kurdish civil war in the area, which is totally wrong. The PKK recruits heavily from Kurdish people because it offers an independent united Kurdistan which will be built by using violence against the sovereign states. Mostly Turkey actually in this case. The PKK's initial and the paramount target has been Turkey from the day first up until now. The misunderstanding comes from the point that the PKK has a few thousand armed people, mostly seeking shelter in Iraq and in Syria, but in Turkey there are 80,000 Kurdish militia, we call them the village guards, which fight against the PKK. So yes, the PKK has a number of Kurdish militia, but also the rival village guards, up to 80,000 people, which outnumber the PKK forces, and that is why PKK has no safe haven in Turkey, within Turkey. So it's not only an inter-ethnic war, or civil war, or just an inter-ethnic terrorism, but there is a lot of things going on in terms of intra-ethnic affairs. That being said, the PKK's primary targets have been not Turkey's Turkish ethnic group, but mostly the Kurds. All ethnic terrorist organizations primarily target their acquaintance. ETA killed many Basque residents. IRA killed many Irish, even Catholic Irish people. The Tamil Tigers killed way more Tamils when compared to the Sinhalese population. So similarly, the primary target of the PKK has been, on the one hand, the Turkish security forces, on the other hand, the local Kurdish population. Over the past 2 years, at the end of today, when we look at the Turkish political landscape, with focus on the upcoming elections on June 24th, what we will see is again the representation of Turkish Kurds. Half of them under AK Party, the ruling AK Party, ranks, and the other half under ethnic Kurdish ranks. And I will conclude my presentation with an announcement, with let's say statement on the necessary cohesion. When we look at inter-ethnic violence, we shouldn't see them as mutually exclusive categories, but we should also pay attention to the intra-ethnic victims of ethnic terrorist organizations. In the case of Turkey, the PKK is a textbook example of such intra-ethnic targeting. So it will be a huge misunderstanding to explain the matter in purely ethnic, in purely mutually exclusive ethnic language. And here I conclude my discussion with this last statement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Очень хорошо.